Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, Terry Fontenot is up to something. We'll discuss.
And yep, it's a must-win in Beantown, but the question is, can they actually pull it off?
And last but not least, and for the culture, Draymond Green is out here cutting WWE promos again. We'll talk about all that next, right here on ATL Day Ones. Let's go.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Want to say thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you in advance. ATL Day Ones, your team every day. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. But T, when you think about what the Atlanta Falcons have done in the past couple of days. Now, we talked about how Bud Dupree has been signed by the Falcons, and that's an edge guy. And then they got a man, Mr. Etheridge, offensive lineman. They just signed an offensive lineman, Mr. Etheridge, to help out up front. Not necessarily a guy who I would think would be considered for a starter. But I think the big news is, or the thing that really has stood out over the past couple of days, is the fact that the Atlanta Falcons are the only team between 5 and 10 that has not seen him. So I think that's one of the things that really stood out, T. But when you think about all these things, reportedly about to get ready to visit with Jalen Carter, the signing of Etheridge, the signing of Bud Dupree, do you think any of these things are indicators as to what the Falcons are going to do at 8 come April? Just next week now, T. We are a little bit over a week away right now.
I think the signing of Dupree and Ethan Greenidge are both, to me, indications of what can take place next year. So it's really in line with the pattern of signing the one-year prove-it deals. We saw it last year. We're seeing it again this year, where the Falcons are saying, hey, look, if you guys can prove yourselves, we'll do with you what we did with, say, Lorenzo Carter, and we'll bring you back if you're that good, right? But if not, then we can part ways, no harm, no foul, and we really didn't take a lot of cap space, and that builds us up even more next year to, again, go after players with the likes of a David Onyemata or a Jesse Bates. So I sneakily suspect that some of these free agency signings are also pointing us to where they think they might have a need next year, should they have a need, right? So that, I believe, is part one. And then I believe part two, to your point, is that some of these signings as well, and I hate to say this, Jarvis, but it is something that we actually have to consider at this point. When you continue to build up, right, build the depth in the trenches, my thought process is one of two things. Now, could it still mean that you're still going after the generational player? Absolutely. Because I'm really seeing you go after a generational player in the trenches. And when I say that, meaning, okay, we know Calais Campbell is on, sort of the downside.
The twilight of his career. Yes.
Twilight of his career. That's a better way to say it. Yes. So you still have, to me, some upside and some optimism about getting that guy in the trenches. And I believe you still have some upside on the possibility of getting somebody at left guard, because I don't think we've seen them go out and get an elite player there. So I think, Jarvis, it may have implications that we are foreseeing what they are looking at for 2024 in terms of free agency and maybe the draft a little bit. But I also think it's an indication that, hey, we are still looking for that elite player at 8. And yes, that player could be Jalen Carter.
And you know what? And I tweeted this out yesterday basically to the tune of exactly what you're saying. And I think that if a best player available is what I feel like they're setting themselves up, essentially, right? And when you think about that, that doesn't necessarily mean that, you're going to stay right there and pick the best player available. That may mean that, hey, you may trade up and go get a guy that you feel like can be that game-changing or a generational type player up front, whether it be on the offensive line or the defensive line. And then more so in this draft in particular, it would probably be somebody on the defensive side of the football that puts his hands in the dirt. So I think that, I think you're really onto something, because like we understand what Terry Fontenot has been doing, right? Like every step of the process. Okay, you go out and sign Jesse Bates. You go out and get a David Onyemata. Then you go out and get a Calais Campbell. Then you go out and get trade for a Jeff Okudah, which no one saw coming. You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, you need secondary help. Hey, you need help up front. Hey, you need to get past somebody with Grady Jarrett that might be able to help him out from not only on the field but off the field as well from a leadership standpoint. So and you basically checked all the boxes when it comes to those things. The only thing that hasn't been checked, T, is the fact that a young, like you said, a young generational type player off the edge, and also who's going to be the left guard. So I think these are some of the things that we definitely have to pay attention to and keep an eye on, because these are some of the things that are going to be crucial come next week when it comes crunch time. And I think that I got an idea of, what Terry Fontenot may be up to, because, like I said, I've been putting some things together. I've been working on my ATL Day One's mock draft. We got that coming next week for y'all, so y'all make sure y'all stay tuned for that, because we are going to drop that bad boy. We're going to drop that heat like we always do with y'all, so make sure you be on the lookout for that. T, speaking of being on the lookout for things, we were talking about Max Fried hopping on the mound last night, but when you think about him getting on that mound last night, T, it was business as usual when it comes to what we expect from our ace. Yes, I said our ace. No hits last night, T. He went 5 innings, and Brian Snickers said after the game, like, hey, this is what we wanted him to get to, and we wanted to play it safe, and now we look like we're going to be able to go business as normal going forward in his next start, T.
Yeah, exciting. You bring 10 batters up, Max Fried sits 10 batters down, period. That's how it goes for him in 5 innings. The stat that stood out for me the most was 79 pitches. Pulled that off.
Efficient.
Efficiency is so amazing. And then want to give an honorable mention shout out to the bullpen, because you held serve. All the Braves needed was the 2-run home run from Austin Riley in the first inning to win that game. And we know it was a little bit more of a shootout when the Padres came to Truist Park last week, right? So
right.
To see them to be able to do this with just 2 runs batted in, I think that's really impressive, because that also means that once Max Fried sits and he's done his work, then it's up to the rest of your guys to take it through those last 4 innings. And when you're talking about rendering them scoreless and 2 hits, the rest of the way, that is impressive. And that's what you and I talked about yesterday, of getting an all-around game from the Braves, because the other piece is if Max Fried and the bullpen hold serve, and then you get at least those 2 runs at the plate, the next thing is your defense has to make sure that the Padres get no runs. Mission accomplished in all 3 phases.
And the thing that I've really loved about the Braves this year is the fact that they've been getting off to really good starts at the plate. And they started that last night with Austin Riley getting the party started, where, with the 2-run home run. And, obviously Ronald Acuna setting the table, getting on base and everything like that. It's just these, like, I think they scored 17 runs in the first inning, and that leads the major leagues. So when you think about that, like, when you have, before a guy like Max Fried even touches the mound, he has a 2-run lead, and he's basically said, you know what? That's all I need. I don't need anything else. I'm good. Yeah, that's what y'all gonna give me tonight. Yeah. Absolutely, I'll take it. And he took it and ran with it. And when you think about that, so we would definitely keep an eye on this, because we've seen this before. T. We saw them win the first game of the series against the San Diego Padres. We want to keep that party going and keep this bad boy going as the Braves continue the series out there in San Diego, where they've won 9 out of 11. So, yeah, they've been doing pretty well on the road out there at Petco Park. Now, I want to tell you guys about what the Atlanta Hawks got going on. What they're going to do tonight, we don't know. We're going to talk about it, though. But first, we got to talk about FanDuel.com/LockedOn, because it is the #1 sports book in America. It is also, you guys have been rocking with us Monday through Friday, each and every day, because we are the #1 podcast in your hearts. So we want you to get the #1 sports book in your hearts and get going and win some money, because they have each and everything that you need, right? They got the money lines. They got the over-unders. They have all the threes drained. Like, you can even go threes drained. You know how many three-pointers the Hawks shoot. So, hey, based off of what they did in the game one, you might want to go to under on that bad boy. So, you never know. So, but yeah, head to fanduel.com/lockedon and check out and take advantage of the no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. You can even combine all your bets for a same game parlay. So head there today. The no sweat first bet. This is for first time users, y'all. If you haven't been there before, first time users, no sweat first bet up to $1,000 if your first bet doesn't win. And make sure you head to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today. It is the #1 sportsbook in America.
So, Jarvis, to call it a must-win is probably an understatement, but Hawks are back in must-win territory. Yes, it is only game 2 of this opening round series against the Celtics. But when you get blown out, and don't let that 13-point win by the Celtics fool you into thinking it wasn't a blowout, because at one point, Celtics led by 32 points, 30 points at the half, but they won. So it is important to know that, yes, this is one of those games where the Hawks have to try their best to steal one. The question becomes this. Yes, it is obvious that one of the things they're going to need to do, Jarvis, is shoot better from the perimeter. You cannot go 17% from beyond the arc and expect to beat really any team in the NBA, to be quite honest, these days.
Right.
Secondly, if you're going to do that, you can't also lose your identity on defense and get out-rebounded by about 15 rebounds.
Yeah.
But when you look into the numbers, whether you look into the numbers, Jarvis, or whether you look at a particular player or a particular group of players, just give me one thing that maybe you saw that was good in that game one that you're like, okay, if I could just see more of that, maybe the Hawks have a shot tonight.
Wow. Yeah, I probably have to do some dissertational research on that one to try to find something good from that past game, because I think, let me say this. One thing that I thought that was a positive, it was the fact that, Bogey started off shooting terribly, but you start to see him kind of catch fire like a shooter does. Like, a shooter's going to continue to shoot. Like, guys like Bogey, if he's struggling, like, I'm sitting at the bench, man, keep shooting, bro, because at some point he's going to start making those shots. And I think that you saw him do that whenever Hawks got it down to 12 points. And obviously now, the Celtics went back on a run like we expected them to, and eventually it ended up closing the game out. But I think that there's a lesson to be learned with what happened with Bo. Is if you are going to struggle, there are going to have to be some aspects of your game that they're going to have to pick up, right? Like, if you're not shooting the rock well, like, you can't afford to kind of say, take it easy on the defensive side of the court. Like, that just is unacceptable. Like JC and DeAndre, y'all, if you're going to struggle on offense, lock down on defense, and eventually that defensive lockdown will lead to points. And we've seen this team do that before. Guys like DeJounte Murray has normally lead the way when it comes to things like that. So, and taking chances on defense and going for, being aggressive, with his on-ball defending. So those are some of the things that I feel like the Hawks need to do, right? Like, and from a positive standpoint, like, if you're going to struggle, it happens. Like, 3-point shooting team, like I said, we mentioned yesterday, it seems like every team in the NBA is a 3-point shooting team. So, I don't think we have to even point that out anymore. So when you're struggling from the 3-point line, make sure that you lock down on defense and really focus, because good defense, or good to great defense, can lead to some solid offense.
And I love that you pointed out that Bogdan Bogdanović did what a shooter does, which is you just have to keep shooting until the shots fall. And right. I also think that one of the goods was points in the paint. I mean, it was 54 for the Celtics, 54 for the Hawks. Exploit that. Go back in. That is maybe the one area where, not to say that the Celtics aren't solid with the likes of Robert Williams or Al Horford, but it is to say that you can compete with them. Obviously, right. Points in the paint show that you can. And on the offensive rebounding boards, you were close enough. Now, you should have had a little bit more of a gap, because that's where you pulled up and got yourself off the canvas the last 20-plus games of the season to even get into or stay in the play-in tournament, right? So just go there and exploit. I want to see more points in the paint. And Jarvis, not just from the bigs, backcourt. If the three isn't falling for you, be aggressive and drive the lane. Get some floaters in there. Get some contact. And get in there and
do something. Just fight. Come on, somebody.
Right.
Do something.
Right. Or just, to me, that's an area where maybe the Hawks sneakily had a solid game, and maybe they can build upon that from game one. Now, the obvious is what you mentioned as well in terms of what they can do better that we saw from game one to game two. And that is, absolutely, you have got to get it from the 3 and the 4 position. And honestly, okay, John Collins, it could be you. DeAndre Hunter, it could be you, but I don't really care at this point. I don't care if it's Big Bay, AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson. I don't care if you want to play kind of small ball style or whatever Quin Snyder is dialing up, if you will. All I know is that Clint Capella is played a decent, solid game on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
So if he can just play just a bit better, just step his game up ever so slightly. If we can get some more out of that backcourt, that's fine. That's still going to be Trae stepping up and DeJounte stepping up. I don't necessarily think that we're going to see, Aaron Holiday or Bogdan Bogdanović just do wonders. So that's going to mean Trae and DeJounte step up. But with that 3-4, Jarvis, you hit on something. It's got to be Dre and JC, but I'm going to hit on the other piece. If it's not, Quin Snyder's got to go to his bench and say, you guys got to give me something. Double O, give me something. AJ, I'm going to insert you this time because he wasn't inserted in the lineup in game one. Give me something. Like, they've got to be ready to go in the event that the starters just don't give them what they need. Now, speaking of, this was something that Landry Fields somewhat alluded to in an interview this morning with the Morning Shift on 92.9 The Game. He talked about the fact that, there are some opportunities there because some of these guys have never been in a playoff situation and certainly not in the TD Garden. So it may be something where not so much that it was a focus situation, but maybe there are some things that they can kind of tweak and improve upon, and it's an opportunity for them to learn and grow. Now, that is not verbatim. That is giving you guys the Cliff Notes version of what he said. But what I heard in some of those comments was, maybe we are still understanding that this is still an audition for next season. This is still an evaluation for who could potentially contribute to this team next season. That said, looks like Quin Snyder's been doing a little bit of evaluating who could be on his bench for the coaching staff next season in the form of one Mike Bray. Now, most recently, I believe The Athletic reported it, but Pete Thamel reported it a couple of weeks ago as well. And then a few weeks before that, the Notre Dame Insider actually alluded to it when the thought was that Bray was going to get that job at USF. It didn't pan out for him. Then he thought about TV, but he was also maybe eyeing this position because of his relationship with Quin Snyder. But my question to you is this. Very interesting move by Quin Snyder. What do you think is the primary reason, other than their longstanding relationship, that Quin Snyder might have thought, hey, I'd like to bring Bray to this bench?
I think it's a matter of bringing in people that he knows the most. Because let's keep it funky, right? We can go here real quick. Like, more than likely, 95% of the guys that are on that bench right now are probably not going to be here next year. And I think that, especially Jamil McMillan, you know what I mean? So it's just awkward, at this point. So I think that, getting his own guys in here, getting guys that are familiar with how he wants to do things. And to be honest with you, Bray is a guy that can kind of deliver the message as well because he coached Quin Snyder. And Snyder is a guy that has the ultimate respect for a guy who coached him because, hey, he coached him, what was it, 87? When Quin Snyder was a player at Duke, who was an absolute hooper, by the way. I don't know you guys. Hey, Snyder was a hooper. He was All-American. Dude was the real deal back in the day. So I think I'm not too surprised that he's become the type of coach that he has become. Being a former player and being able to coming through up the ranks, as an assistant coach and being able to establish a lot of relationships because he's a relationship guy. Like, dig into Quin Snyder for those you don't know. This guy is a relationship guy, and when you have guys that can move men like he can, and also teach men like he can, like I'm really excited about this particular regime and this coaching staff, and he's starting off pretty well with getting a guy like Mike Bray and bringing him into the fold.
Yeah, I think it's a solid move because he is someone that Quin Snyder can trust. So I think that's a piece of it. Another piece is he's fresh off out of the college ranks,
Right.
and the Hawks at their core are still a very young team. So there may be some connectivity, some learnings that maybe he can give because Quin Snyder is very much removed from the college basketball game, if
It's,
you will.
it's
So I think that could help out. And then I think about someone like Pat Connaughton, right? Who has a lot of the fundamentals that you want to see in your players because and high basketball IQ. I always go back to
yeah.
that.
Oh
And
yeah, for
so a
sure.
part of that can certainly be attributed to Pat Connaughton, but a part of that can also be contributed to Mike Bray as well. So I think that could be possibly something that you can look to the kind of player that Mike Bray has cultivated in someone like Pat Connaughton, and can he bring some of that to the table for the Hawks as well? So yeah, I think it could be a solid move for the Hawks overall. We'll see. What a solid move, I believe, was never quite solid was the move of Kevin Herter. You guys know that we watch the NBA playoffs in their entirety. So we're not just
Yes.
looking at what Hawks Celtics are doing, but we're watching the other teams. And because one of our guys, or one of our buddies, the show, Brian Gephardt, is now a program director out in Sacktown. So we've been in touch with him just asking about the hoopla in Sacramento. It is absolutely bonkers. Of course, the Kings pull off another win against the Warriors last night. They're now up 2-0. But Jarvis, all I kept thinking of was 15 points, 6 of 14 shooting from the field, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks and a steal. Man, do we miss Red Velvet or what?
Yes. Because when you think about the previous regime and Travis Lane, the one thing that general managers don't do, or president of basketball operations, or the people who make the big boy decisions when it comes to the roster, they don't get rid of guys that they cultivated, that they brought up, because nobody saw Kevin Herter becoming the player that he became when he was drafted by the Hawks. Nobody saw, yeah, I know I talk a lot of trash about him, when John Collins, nobody thought he was going to be the player to be able to get a $25 million annual contract a year over year. So that's why when that trade went down, something was funky. Something was up. Something wasn't particularly right when you have him trade one of his guys, because those are the guys that are staples that you build a team around. Nobody thought that Kevin Herter was on the trading block, because you've heard John Collins been on the trading block for 3 years now, but he's still on the team. But when you hear the trade go down and there was no rumors leading up to it, it kind of had to be an abrupt decision. And I feel like wholeheartedly that wasn't Travis Slank's decision. And I think right now, and we know that more than likely they had to trade him in order to bring DeJounte Murray into the fold or make the money work. But you just got to look back at it and just say, you know what? He didn't have that great of a shooting night, but he was finding a way to be effective on the court to the tune of a plus 16 and plus minus on the court, T. That's what we've been talking about. Hey, if you're not going to shoot well, we get it, but you got to be effective at some point, because otherwise you just can't be on the court.
Yeah. And of course, yeah, he's known for his perimeter shooting. So it's interesting
Yes.
to see that he was 6 of 14 from the field. But like you said, looking across his entire stat line, it's a stat line that's very, very consistent with his stat line for the entire season, except, of course, his 3-point stat, of course, is decidedly higher. But
Right.
that said, when you're looking across the entire season, the entirety of the season, for the Hawks, and you look in that particular category of 3-point production, especially in the second
They
unit,
struggle.
whom you can easily insert into the first unit, you really, really do miss a Kevin Herter. And of course, we congratulate him because he's one of the guys who is truly a fan favorite, a media favorite as well. He got an award for being so friendly and so amenable to the local media, but proud of that guy. But certainly when you see someone like him doing what he's doing in Sacramento, it definitely makes you look at the Hawks and say, wow, that's probably one of the areas that's going to need to be addressed in the offseason, whether you do it in free agency or whether you do it in the first round of the draft. You're going to have to get somebody who can be another sharp shooter to complement Bogdan Bogdanovic off the bench. But we know our everydayers, we want to hear from you guys. I mean, have you guys been watching Kevin Herter and seeing what he's doing out on the court, seeing what he's doing on the West Coast? Have you guys been watching the rest of these NBA finals and kind of looking and saying, boy, sure would be nice if the Warriors didn't give Klay Thompson that max contract that he's looking for. Does he possibly want to come here? You all know that conversation that had taken place about a year or two ago. You guys want to have that conversation again? Continue being our everydayers. We appreciate you guys from being with us from day one and for this being your first listen of the day and maybe your first look as well if you go to YouTube and check us out. But of course, wherever you get your podcast, don't forget to tell a friend. It's not too late for them to become everydayers as well.
But T, this is for the culture. It is the intersection between sports, entertainment, the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about. Because that's just how we get down on the show. Today is no different. T, when you think about the NBA playoffs, I've been talking a lot about the Hawks versus the Celtics. But we know there are other series going down. We talked about Kevin Huerter as well and how we miss him so much down here in the city of Atlanta. But another thing going down, another big star, Draymond Green, T, gets ejected from the game because, Domantas Sabonis, Arvydas Sabonis' son, Arvydas Sabonis was good at basketball. Domantas Sabonis is good at basketball as well. Not too surprised by that notion. But they got into a little altercation essentially in the fourth quarter with about 7 minutes to go in the game. And Domantas Sabonis was falling down, and he said to break his fall, he kind of grabbed Draymond Green's leg, and then Draymond decided to say, you know what, I'm running full speed, dog. Like, let me go ahead and step this foot down, and it just so happened to be on Sabonis' chest. And he eventually got ejected, but I think the thing for me, T, is it's kind of hard for me to take Draymond Green seriously sometimes when it comes to this type of stuff because we know this is the type of stuff that he's into. When he's going riling the crowd up and they're chanting his name like Draymond sucks and all this stuff, and he's up here egging them on, standing up with the towel on his head and all that stuff, I'm just like, it's kind of hard for me to kind of take him seriously post game when he was saying, my leg's been grabbed twice, and in these games, I guess grabbing ankles isn't an issue, and then reportedly that he even went so far as to get an X-ray on his ankles, T, to see if he was hurt. Like,